reading some folk tales today, mostly indigenous, and we all know the pain and the horrible things that happen to the natives, but not enough of the good things get talked about, like their culture and their stories, and just more about their everyday life. So I'm going through something right now, and I'm trying to learn all that because I've been lied to with what I learned in school, and a lot of people I thought were good were not. So without further ado, I'm going to read some stories. This one is from the book The Spirit of Butterflies. This book is out of print, and it is a wonderful book that talks about all the stories of butterflies and everything throughout all the cultures. So this one, it's a folk tale from the natives, and I'm pretty sure it takes place in Mexico. When the gods first arrived in Mexico, they were guided by the flight of butterflies. The butterflies came from the direction of the north along a route full of flowers and fruits. Both the butterflies and the gods came to the same place by the same route. All this time, at this time, they did not exist. All was night. When all the gods gathered, they asked, "Who will light the world?" A god named Ferjucatile boldly said, "I will undertake this. I will light the world." The gods conferred again. "Is there anyone else who wishes to do it?" Everyone remained silent until at last the god Nanahuzin offered himself. After this, the gods lit a huge and very hot bonfire, the smoke and the flames from which drove the snakes to the pitted bottom of the earth. The gods said, "Jump into the fire," but Frizrocatile was afraid of the pain. Indignant, there was no light. The gods turned to Nanahuzulin and commanded him to jump into the flames. Nanahuzulin closed his eyes and drew himself on the fire without hesitation. Upon seeing this, Frizrocatile then threw himself on the bonfire. The gods sang, and the day began to turn red. Light began to shoot forth towards the sky, and everyone knelt down to await the appearance of Nozulin, changed into the sun, and Frexal changed into the moon. It was never again dark in the world. The gods conferred again, and now with what will we adorn this light which has arrived to the world? The light requires color, they said. Who wishes to adorn the earth? They asked. All looked at each other, and Quetzalcoatl said, "I will do it." And he drew with his own life many lines and points of color in space, and gave himself the plumed wings of a butterfly. Thereafter he became known as the plumed butterfly. The gods insisted, "But your life will not last long since you have turned into color." Quetzalcoatl responded, "It doesn't matter. I will not disappear when I die. I will fall from the sky which I adorn, and adorn the earth as well." And so it happened. He flew away into space and fell from the sky to the earth, where there was emptiness. There were now flowers and butterflies of every color. And this is how the world was prepared for man. Some of those names, I'm not going to lie, I struggled with, and I don't believe that I pronounced them right. So don't crucify me for that. Now, I know I should have these bookmarks, shouldn't I? This book is magical. It was written by a wonderful spiritual lady who I looked at a picture and I instantly knew everything she was about. No judgment, I guess. Now, this myth I believe, came from Europe. A long time ago, an old man named Takalama lived in a little cottage behind the cemetery of the Temple of Sojani. Everyone in the village liked this gentle, quiet man, but thought him to be strange, since he had never married, nor had he any desire for companionship of woman. When Takahama became seriously ill, his sister-in-law and her son arrived to take care of him and bring him comfort during his last days. When he was near death, sleeping quietly in his bed, a white butterfly flew into his room and alighted on his pillow. His nephew drove it out, fearing it would disturb the old man, but it returned 3 times until all the doors and windows were barred and it could not enter. The nephew chased the butterfly through the garden, beyond the gate, and into the cemetery, where it hovered above the woman's grave for some time before disappearing. The name Akiko was inscribed on the headstone, along with the description of how she had died at the age of 18. The gravestone was at least 50 years old and covered with moss. Yet there was fresh flowers and recently filled water bowl. When the young nephew returned, he found that Takahama had just died. He shared the tale of his butterfly adventure with his mother, who told him that his uncle had been betrothed to Akiko, who had died the day before their wedding was to have taken place. Takahama had vowed to remain faithful to her, and he did so all throughout his life, visiting her grave daily, winter or summer, bringing flowers, sweeping it, and praying for her peace and happiness. When Takahama was dying, and he could no longer visit her grave, the white butterfly, the sweet loving soul of the young Akiko, went to visit him. That's a nice story. It might be Asian based on the names. I don't know. Um, just magical stories. Very enlightening, very spiritual, very positive. Now I'm going to read something kind of more from the dark recesses of history around referring to the Holocaust. So let me find it in this wonderful big old book. Let me put this bookmark away. Alright. This one is kind of dark but really hopeful. The butterfly counts not months but moments and has time enough. That is a quote by Ramindranath Tagore. Alright, this is the story. It's about a woman in World War II, and it's related to the Holocaust. Terezin concentration camp was a concentration camp for children where they would go to be unfortunately killed. And they found butterfly drawings, etched into the walls along with some poems and other documents on paper. The ones written in the wall were written with rocks and fingernails and that kind of stuff. So I don't want to imagine what that was like, but you can just by hearing it. So that's the second part of what I'm going to read after this. I once met a woman who had been a child of 4 at the start of World War II. Her Jewish family had fled Germany and was hidden by French farmers. Near the house in which they had stayed, down a 6-foot embankment, was a creek where the children were allowed to play along the flowers and rocks and the fast-flowing water. And here were butterflies. Sometimes the children would catch them and show them to the adults and let the butterflies fly free. These were the happiest years of my friend's life, which she remembers as being full of beauty, freedom, and laughter. In later years, she would feel guilty about the time in her life because she was happy while so many millions were suffering and dying. When the children came up from the stream, they would bring with them more than colorful butterflies and laughter. They brought joy and hope and a glimmer of light to their families, and that gave them all the courage, a hint of normalcy, a special moment in the midst of a dark war. Without the children's laughter and lightness, there would have been only despair The butterfly is the symbol of that light. When we see the butterfly, it stirs the magic and wonder within, awakening and stirring our hearts and spirits. And a world without butterflies would be a world without hope. The following poem was written by 21-year-old Pavel Friedman while he was living in a Jewish ghetto, Terezin in Czechoslovakia in 1942. When he recognized that a world that hates, destroys, and kills children, a world devoid of butterflies, is a world without hope, he died in a Nazi concentration camp 2 years after he wrote this poem. The poem is titled, I Never Saw Another Butterfly. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow, perhaps as if the sun's tear would sing against a white stone. Such a yellow is carried lightly away up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks I've lived here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found my people here. The dandelions called to me, and the white chestnut candles in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here in the ghetto. And this is a wonderful story that goes along with that. In January 1998, a group of children from Chabad Academy, a private school in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was studying the Holocaust with their teacher, Eleanor Schiller. The students learned how many children were exterminated because numbers are so impersonal. They decided that they wanted to remember the murdered children as individuals by making paper butterflies to represent each child who died. In order to achieve their goal, they would have to create 1,200,000 paper butterflies before April 23rd, Holocaust Remembrance Day. By February, they had created 8,000 butterflies, and they knew they needed help. 18 teachers and their students from local schools participating in the workshops on the Holocaust created thousands more butterflies, but even those were not enough. The students reached out to the news organizations, which quickly spread the word to other children and teachers. And by the deadline, they had made and received from other students more than 1,300,000 butterflies, which they had attached to wooden sticks. The fields and meadows were blanketed with multicolored butterflies, the spirits of the dead children. One of the students was heard to say, "Butterflies are like children full of color." She might have added, "and full of spirit." Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a doctor widely known for her work on death and dying, described in her book, The Wheel of Life, a memoir of living and dying, a journey she made to the site of the Majdanek concentration camp in Poland. Shortly after World War II, she visited the children's barracks, where she encountered clothes and little shoes tossed aside. But she also saw something that first surprised and then amazed her. Carved into the walls with pebbles and fingernails were butterflies, hundreds and hundreds of them, spellbound by the sight of butterflies drawn on the wall. She couldn't help but wonder why they were there and what they meant. 25 years later, after listening to the hundreds of terminally ill patients, she finally realized that the prisoners in the camps must have known that they were going to die. They knew that soon they would become butterflies. Once dead, they would be out of this hellish place, not tortured anymore, not separated from their families, not sent to the gas chambers. None of this gruesome life mattered anymore. Soon they would leave their bodies the way a butterfly leaves its cocoon. And I realized that was the message they wanted to leave for future generations. It also provided imagery that I would use for the rest of my career to explain the process of death and dying, she says. Perhaps not coincidentally, there are accounts of thousands of butterflies having alighted on Auschwitz, Majdanek, and other death camps for years after the Holocaust. Souls free at last. So, this book is really informative and it's magical, and it's very magical. I forgot to say, I've said that enough, right? I forgot to say the author is, and I want to look at her name so I don't get it wrong. Well, it's not on the outside. Here we go. Marlene Jones. This is what the book looks like without the blanket. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye-bye.